It was October 12, 1978, inside New York's infamous Chelsea Hotel, where a single room became the scene of one of punk rock's darkest tragedies. A young woman lay bleeding on the bathroom floor, stabbed once in the abdomen. She was just 20 years old. Her name was Nancy Spungen. Beside her, incoherent and barely able to stand, was 19-year-old Sid Vicious, the bassist of the Sex Pistols and punk's most notorious icon. The world woke that morning to headlines of violence, addiction, and young love gone horribly wrong. What really happened in Room 100 has never been fully resolved. Was it a crime of passion, a tragic accident, or the work of someone else entirely? To understand, we have to go back to the world Sid and Nancy built for themselves, a world of rebellion, chaos, and self-destruction. The late 1970s were a violent, unpredictable time for music. Punk wasn't just a sound, it was a rebellion. At the heart of the storm stood Sid Vicious. Tall, gaunt, sneering, he wasn't a trained musician, but he didn't need to be. He was a symbol, the living embodiment of punk's nihilism. By his side, from almost the moment he rose to fame, was Nancy Spungen. Loud, brash, and unapologetic, Nancy came from Philadelphia, where she battled mental health issues from childhood. By her teens, she was chasing punk bands across the US and UK, and when she met Sid in London in 1977, their lives fused in a toxic, drug-fueled bond. Outsiders saw their love as destructive, even parasitic. To Sid and Nancy, it was survival. Together, they clung to heroin, violence, and each other. By 1978, with the Sex Pistols broken apart, Sid was adrift. No career, no structure, nothing but Nancy and his addiction. The couple retreated into the Chelsea Hotel, a decaying landmark of artists, musicians, and misfits. Dylan Thomas had drunk himself to death there. Bob Dylan had written songs there. Patti Smith had called it home. For Sid and Nancy, Room 100 was their lair, a smoke-filled den where curtains stayed drawn and drug deals happened as casually as room service. In the weeks leading to October 12th, friends saw the tension rise. Money was gone. Sid was cutting himself. Nancy talked of suicide. Sid Vicious was never meant to be a rock star in the traditional sense. Born John Simon Ritchie in London in 1957, he grew up in the underbelly of Britain, poverty, broken homes, and a sense of disillusionment that would later fuel the punk explosion. By the time he was a teenager, he had already developed the sneer, the attitude, and the nihilism that would make him infamous. He drifted through the early punk scene, hanging around with bands, absorbing the style, earning a reputation as a volatile presence with a short temper and a love of violence. When the Sex Pistols' original bassist, Glenn Matlock, left the band in 1977, frontman John Lydon, better known as Johnny Rotten, didn't want a skilled musician. He wanted an image. He wanted someone who represented punk's rawness, its ugliness, its refusal to play by any rules. And Sid fit the bill perfectly. He couldn't play his instrument well, but when he stepped on stage, bass slung low, hair spiked, eyes hollow with menace, he was punk. He cut his chest with broken glass during performances, hurled insults at the crowd, and injected chaos into everything the Pistols did. For a band built on shock and outrage, Sid was the ultimate weapon. But Sid was also fragile. Beneath the bravado was a boy who craved love, loyalty, and a place to belong. He found that in Nancy Spungen. The night of October 11th, 1978, at the Chelsea Hotel began like so many others for Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen, chaotic, drug-fueled, and volatile, yet charged with a strange intimacy that only the two of them could understand. As the evening wore on, Room 100 became a vortex of substance abuse, erratic energy, and simmering tension, with heroin, vodka, and cigarettes flowing freely, friends and hangers-on drifting in and out, some bringing money or drugs, others just curiosity, all silently observing the intensity of the couple's relationship, while Sid alternated between moments of manic aggression and lethargic stupor, slurring his words and staggering through the dimly lit room, Nancy hovering close, barking instructions, pressing her presence onto him, protecting him, controlling him, and perhaps, in her own way, challenging him to confront the darkness in both of them, until the night grew long, the air thick with smoke and fear, and something imperceptible shifted between them, a tension that would not be resolved, a silent prelude to tragedy, as Sid allegedly picked up a hunting knife that had been purchased recently, its steel glinting faintly in the half-light. while Nancy wandered between the bed and bathroom, her mind perhaps clouded by heroin and paranoia, their voices raised and lowered, laughter mingling with shouting, a fragile rhythm of dependence and aggression, until, in the early hours of October 12th, something went catastrophically wrong. What exactly occurred remains a matter of dispute, but by the time hotel staff discovered the scene just after 11 a.m., Nancy was collapsed on the bathroom floor, a single stab wound to her abdomen, her blood pooling on the tiles, the knife nearby, Sid sitting or lying unconscious or semi-conscious, incoherent and barely able to explain himself, with initial police reports describing a scene of utter chaos, dishes, ashtrays, drug paraphernalia, and scattered personal belongings all bearing witness to the night's descent into violence, while witnesses offered conflicting accounts, some saying Sid had been alone with Nancy at the critical moment, others noting strangers had entered or left the room that night, some insisting they heard arguments escalating to blows, and yet others hinting at a bizarre form of twisted complicity between the two, a toxic pact that might have included Nancy provoking or even participating in her own demise, whether intentionally or accidentally. Police quickly arrested Sid, who, in those first bewildered hours, muttered statements that alternated between admission, confusion, and denial, at one point reportedly saying, "I did it because I'm a dirty dog," and later, "I can't remember," while forensic evidence, the wound, the knife, the position of the bodies, was cataloged and analyzed, though it provided no definitive answer, leaving investigators and later historians to puzzle over motive, opportunity, and the influence of the drugs that had consumed their lives, all under the dim fluorescent light of the Chelsea's bathroom, a small stage for a drama that would shock the world, a room that had witnessed decades of creative brilliance and human failure, now transformed into the epicenter of punk rock's most infamous tragedy. And as the hours ticked by, police interviews began, journalists arrived, and friends whispered theories into notebooks and tape recorders, all while Sid remained in a haze, disconnected from the consequences of that night, unable to explain how love, addiction, and violence had collided into a single fatal moment, leaving Nancy dead, Sid arrested, and the world asking the question that would never be fully answered. What really happened in room 100 at the Chelsea Hotel in the early hours of October 12, 1978? Nancy as a victim, or in some cases, both as equally culpable, ensuring that public perception became just as muddled as the police case files, leaving investigators to confront the impossible task of separating fact from rumor, evidence from hearsay, memory from hallucination, and ultimately, trying to answer a question that would haunt them and the world for decades. Did Sid Vicious truly kill Nancy Spungen, or was her death the cruel product of circumstance, drugs, and their shared self-destructive obsession? After Nancy's death, Sid Vicious was arrested and charged with her murder, a 19-year-old trapped in a nightmare of his own making. Yet even behind bars, the chaos of his life refused to relent, as he remained heavily addicted to heroin, relying on friends and bail money to survive in a world that had turned against him. And despite occasional moments of seeming clarity, he continued to spiral, unable to escape the toxic bond that had defined him for the past year, while journalists, fans, and former bandmates debated endlessly whether he had killed Nancy or was merely another casualty of addiction and obsession, a question that would haunt him and the public alike. Bail was posted, allowing him temporary freedom, yet he remained a ghost of the boy who had once embodied punk's defiance, his health deteriorating, his mind clouded, and his emotions raw, until February 2nd, 1979, when Sid was found dead from a heroin overdose in New York City, just months after Nancy's death, leaving the world with no answers and 2 young lives extinguished far too soon, their story forever intertwined with the mythos of punk rock and the dangers of love consumed by obsession and addiction. And while some remember them as tragic lovers, others as cautionary figures, and still others as symbols of the self-destructive allure of fame and rebellion, the truth remains impossible to pin down, leaving only fragments of evidence, conflicting testimonies, and the haunting images of a hotel room in chaos, a knife on the floor, and 2 young people lost to each other and to the darkness that surrounded them, a narrative that has become legend, inspiring films, books, songs, and endless speculation, and ultimately reminding us that love, when entwined with addiction, mental illness, and a world willing to enable destruction, can be as lethal as any weapon, leaving a story that begins with music and rebellion and ends in tragedy, a story that continues to fascinate, horrify, and provoke reflection. And as the camera pans away from the Chelsea hotel, fading into the streets of a city that never sleeps, the question still lingers in the mind of anyone who dares to peer into that chaotic, doomed world. What really happened in room 100, and could such intensity of love and obsession ever survive? Or was it destined from the start to burn itself out in flames?